Most new investors have no idea what's going on during a typical house flip. Like there's so much stuff going on and honestly can be kind of overwhelming. So I don't want you to worry too much because in today's video, I'm gonna show you everything that goes on during a house flip from beginning to end. Like literally once you buy the home, get contractor bids to the very end when you finally get it sold. Oh, and also if you're new to the channel, my name's Justin Young and I've helped hundreds of people make money in real estate. All right, so here's how the video is gonna break down. I'm gonna break this video into three main parts because like that's really what goes on during a house flip. There are three main parts. There's the pre-renovation, before you renovate. There's the renovation, and there's the post-renovation. So those three parts will entail everything that you need to know about what happens during a house flip. And I'm not gonna talk about like getting the deal. I've made plenty of videos about that before, but like assuming you've already bought the deal, bought the home, what's next? Like what happens during a house flip, what goes on? Here's what happens. So stage number one, pre-renovation. This is assuming you buy the home, you close on it, now what's next? Now, there's two real main parts that happens. Like one, is there a tenant in there? And is there not a tenant in there? So I guess for getting all the details, I'll just kind of explain what happens if there's a tenant in there. And it's kind of simple. If there's a tenant in there still, if you buy the home with a tenant, you evict them. And it kind of sounds harsh actually now that I say that out loud, but yeah, like you're buying this home to flip and to profit on. And if you're going to have to evict a tenant, it might be a little bit hard, but that's part of the business. And ideally, you do give them some time to, find a new place. Maybe if they're not very cooperative, you can work out something called cash for keys, where you can offer them some money in exchange for them to get out faster. This is the case, a lot of people do this because, well, if you try to evict a tenant fully legally, like the court, the attorney, like all that stuff, like it could take a while, especially if they're not very cooperative. It can go to court, it go to sheriff, like to kick him out, like it takes a lot. So if there's a tenant in there, first deal of business is, you have to start the eviction process. And if you don't know what it looks like, honestly, I've made this mistake in the past where I've like tried to figure out the eviction myself. And I've kind of gone through this recently where I tried to evict the tenant myself, no attorney involved, because I'm like, you know what, most of my tenants have been cooperative in the past. And then I ran into an uncooperative one, tried to do it myself. And I missed one little step in the eviction notice or the process, and I had to kind of restart the whole thing over again. So like I'm wasting money by holding on to the property for longer. So if you're just starting and you have a tenant in there and you want to start the eviction process, I would suggest just get an eviction attorney, just so you kind of learn the right way of doing it legally. And then, once you figure that way out, then you can start to negotiate with tenants. Like, hey, like you figure out, okay, if I'm gonna pay $4,000 or $3,000 to evict this tenant fully, like what if I just offer them $1,000 to get out in 2 weeks? Like, will they take it? Maybe. And so like, that's the first deal of business if you have a tenant in there. Now, if you don't have a tenant in there, the first thing you do, number one, is bring out contractors to get bids on the property. And if you don't know what a bid is, it's essentially where you bring out a contractor, they look at the property, you kind of give them the rundown or the vision of this rehab, and you tell them what you want, and then they give you back a quote for a list of items that they can do, telling you how much it's all gonna cost, like for the project. And that's a bid. They're essentially giving you how much it's gonna cost. They're gonna quote you for all the different details of the rehab. So ideally, I'm bringing out at least 3 contractors to get bids for every single project. And the reason why I bring 3 is if I bring one contractor out there to get a bid, and they know that they're the only contractor I'm bringing out to the property, it's likely that they might charge a little bit higher on all their prices. Now, I'm not saying contractors are bad at all. It's just like human nature, like everyone is out for their own self-interest. And if you bring out multiple contractors, it kind of keeps everyone honest, it keeps their bids competitive. They want to compete with the other contractors so that you select them. So I always bring out at least 3 bids and I make sure that everyone knows that they're gonna be bid against, essentially. So I make it competitive so I get the best possible bids. Also, the cheapest bid is not always the best bid. Just, you should know that. Okay, and another thing that I think I should mention is that I guess, before I even get the bids, this kind of happens realistically a little bit before I close on the property fully, but I create the vision for the property. So like, there's no way I can bring out the contractors to give me bids on the property for how much everything's gonna cost if I don't know myself, what I'm even gonna do with the property. So I have to take some time for myself to actually like look at the pictures of the property. If I'm in person, I could go in the property, but I'm not. So I literally look at pictures and videos, and I have a boots on the ground to help me like envision the property and like what I can do with it. Essentially, I just come up with a game plan. I create a scope of work, which is basically just a bunch of instructions of what to do with the property, like granite countertops, do this with a bathroom, add a new toilet, like every single detail of the renovation project I have before I give to the contractors. Now, another thing you can do, I guess, should I even say this? I mean, if you're super inexperienced, no project management experience, never seen a flip, never seen a rehab, what you could do if you did lock up a deal and you're about to flip it, you could literally just go to the whatever comps you pulled, whatever comparable properties you pulled. You can take the pictures and you can show it to the contractors and you're like, hey, like, I want exactly what this home has. And I'm sure they can give you a bid for that as well. Like, it wouldn't be too hard for them. But for me, I like to like envision the scope of work, every little detail, so that I can send them like exactly what I want. So that's like pre-renovation stage. I, create the vision. I bring out contractors, get me the bids on the property, and then I pick one. I pick the best one that I think is the best for the project, not just the cheapest, but the one that's most trustworthy, the one I can rely on, the one who maybe I have a little bit of a history with, who's been good and maybe have good referrals or good feedback from all my friends who also use them. So I use that, and so I pick the contractor, and from then they start the project. And honestly, this kind of stage of like getting bids, it really takes like a week or two. Depending, honestly, contractors don't get back that quickly for bids. So maybe you take the first week to get bids on for the contractors, and maybe they take another week to get their bid back to you. Now, if you have a good contractor, they can get it back way faster. But ideally, typically that's what I see. So maybe a week or two of pre-renovation where you're getting bids, working with contractors, and then it comes the renovation stage. Now in the renovation stage, you have your contractor selected and they start the project. Now, during this renovation stage, of course, it depends on the size of the project. Most of my renovations last like 6 to 8 weeks, maybe shorter, maybe longer, just depending on kind of what happens in the project. Cause like things pop up. Like if you never flipped a house, things pop up. Like they open up a wall, they see plumbing's all messed up, electrical's messed up, things I just did not expect. That happens. So sometimes things take a little bit longer than planned. Sometimes they're shorter. They're like, oh, like this was an easy project. Like it's just smooth sailing. Actually, rarely that happens, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, during the renovation stage, when the contractors are actually working on the project, the biggest thing to, I guess, understand is that you have to babysit them. Like, even if you get a general contractor, a contractor who's like the lead contractor, the one in charge of all the subcontractors working on the project, even if you get one of those to manage the whole project, you have to have someone, you or someone else, who's the project manager, someone that the general contractor can speak to, and someone that can keep them on timeline and on budget, like the whole time. So it's someone to essentially babysit, check on the property at least twice a week to make sure that they're actually working, and also just to make sure that the property's not like being broken into and stuff like that, because that happens, like squatters happen. So you need a babysitter for the property, for the contractors, just to ensure that the project keeps going along. And I guess typically how I pay contractors is, I see a certain amount of work has been done, and then I pay them for that amount of work, and they just keep doing it. So I pay in little increments. So like if I have a 30K project, they do 5K of work, I pay them 5K. They do the next 5K work, I pay them 5K. And so on. So that's kind of how it works. And I have a project manager to help me identify like when they've done enough work. It's usually when the contractor's like, all right, I need to get paid right now. So when the contractor goes to my project manager, the babysitter, they're gonna go like, hey, we did this amount of work, we're ready for the check. Then my project manager goes out to the property, they check out the property, they're like, I think you need to do this thing, and then we'll give you the next check. And then once they've done that, then they come to me and they're like, all right, can we give them the next check? And then I can say, okay, yeah, they've done enough, let's give them the next check. So like you do that exact thing for the entire 6 to 8 weeks or however long it takes you. Even though it sounds so simple, like as I'm explaining this, it's a lot of work. Like it's so simple, but it's not easy to manage contractors and to manage a renovation project, especially when you're on maybe a timeline, maybe you're using investors' money and they're pressuring you like, hey, like, is this thing, am I gonna get my money back exactly in these 6 months or 8 months or whatever you promised them? Like it can get stressful. So I'm not here to say it's easy. It's simple. It's not easy. Like that's a renovation project. That's really all it is. It's you bring out the contractors, they do their work, and you manage them. If you do not have a project manager, you have to do it yourself. Like full disclosure, if you do not project manage, expect your project to last a lot longer than you planned for. And the reason is if the contractors don't know or don't feel like you're like pressuring them or like on their tail or on their butt, when I say tail, on their butt, then they're gonna feel that they can like slack off, and they probably have other jobs going on, and they're gonna focus on the other jobs where like the owner is like stressing them and like pushing them. So you kind of have to like be on their butt about like, hey, like why aren't you at the property? Like why aren't you working on this project? And if you're not gonna do it, hire someone else to do it. Like that's the biggest thing. So that's the renovation process. Now, the cool thing is after the renovation process is over, here's what happens next. So the renovation is over and now we are in post-renovation. So they fix up everything. The first thing you do before even paying the contractor their final check, you wanna do a final walkthrough with a home. So it's you or your project manager or someone you can trust who understands the project or the rehab to walk through the home, look at it and say, hey, you didn't do this item's not complete, this is a bad job, fix this. Like, you have to do a final walkthrough where they look at all the work that's been done. And essentially what we do is we get like a blue, I don't have it here, we get like a blue painter's tape. It's just blue tape or whatever tape, doesn't matter the color. You rip up a piece and you put tape wherever needs addressing. So maybe they did a really poor job on the paint. Like if that's paint right there, they did a poor job, you just put blue tape, you stick it right there. Like that's all you do. So if that's the case, you do that all throughout the house or someone does that, and the contractor comes out and they fix all that stuff. And you do not give them their final check until all of that stuff is done. So once they do all that work, final walkthrough's done, they fixed all the things in the final walkthrough, then you can pay them their final check. So that's what you really do have to do, because a lot of people, when they get in the flipping game, especially if they're in this market right now, as of recording, so this market we're in right now, it's a big seller's market. So whenever you go to list their home, it's like people are just getting crazy offers, like no matter what. And they're not used to like having to fix stuff up, having repair requests. So like a normal market, you flip a home and then you put it on a market, all these buyers will come in, but they're gonna say, hey, like I want you to fix this, and this. This is why you have to do a final walkthrough to avoid as many of those repair requests as you can, so that you can fix everything, and it's like to make sure that it's good work, you also just have to have a good contractor. That's kind of like the post-renovation final walkthrough. Once everything is complete, the next thing I do is I get it cleaned. So actually, my first one, I cleaned it myself. Like I literally went through the house, scrubbed the floors, I deep cleaned everything. But then I was like, dude, it took me so long, and it honestly was not that good of a job. So from then on, I got a cleaner, and cleaners aren't even that expensive, but I just hired a house cleaner. They cleaned the entire house, like deep clean. So it looked super nice. Like you'd be shocked at what a home will look like cleaned versus not cleaned. Like I'm talking about like an empty house that was rehabbed. So all the new finishes are nice and new, but like they're not clean. And it still looks kind of gross and dirty. So once you clean it, like that's the final. And once it's cleaned, that's when I go and list the property. So I list the property. I don't list it myself. I go with an agent. They list it for me, and then we get it sold. And the listing, selling the home, of course, it depends on what kind of market you're in, but it can take a while. Like sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 7. Like hopefully not 7 months, but it can take a while to sell. And you just kind of have to plan for that up front. So just understand what kind of market you're in before you buy a home. But otherwise, like that's what happens during a flip. That's the pre-renovation, that's a renovation, that's the post-renovation. So hopefully that serves you. That's exactly my process. That's kind of what happens in my house flips. Oh, and also if you want help to grow your real estate business, whether you're brand new, if you already got deals under your belt, I want you to click on the link in the description for a free strategy session. Peace.